Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel is getting more expensive over time. Or, at the very least, that's what these and many other people have to say. It's not a notion that I necessarily disagreed with at first glance. But after seeing so many YouTube comments come in suggesting that decks are getting more expensive over time, and what with me being an annoying enamored with the process of research, I have decided to do a deep dive and really ask the question: are Master Duel decks more expensive now than when the game started? Alright folks, here's how we're going to do this. We're going to be taking a look at the structure of selection packs over time and how that's evolved, the number of total cards per pack, as well as the distribution of UR and other rarities within each selection pack, to see if the odds of pulling the URs you want has actually increased or decreased over time. That's going to be the first portion of this video. For the second, I want to take a look at 10 different meta decks over time and try to evaluate if they have gotten more expensive to build generally as time goes on, using those 10 specific decks as a metric. I do want to point out that I made some notable exclusions from meta decks over time, Branded being the big one, but I also didn't look at Monadium or other Voiceless pile decks either. I tried to exclude decks that have multiple iterations and that gain URs over like 3 or more selection packs over time. I kind of felt like including Branded and Monadium in this analysis might skew my data a little bit. That said, I have done all of the proper research. I have gathered all of the information that I think will be relevant. So let's start diving into it and really asking ourselves, is this game costlier than it used to be? Alright, so before we start taking a look at the individual decks to see if those have gotten more expensive, I actually want to look at the selection packs themselves first. I think this is a great metric by which to measure how expensive the game is. Of course, the number of URs per pack relative to the number of cards per pack is going to be a large determining factor of how likely you are to pull the cards that you need. So, I'm here on Yugipedia. I will be citing my sources in the description below. By the way, if you're interested in checking out any of these links, they should all be down below. And I am starting with the very first Master Duel selection pack that introduced new cards. And that is going to be Ruler's Mask, which was released on April 4th, 2022. This was released simultaneously along with, I believe the pack was called Beyond Speed, which did have new cards in it, like Baron Diffler and Speedroid, but the breakout for the packs are exactly the same, so I just went with Ruler's Mask. Anyway, let's go ahead and scroll on down here, and we see this is the information breakdown that I'm looking for right here. This pack has 80 featured cards, which consists of 10 URs, 15 SRs, 20 Rs, and 35 N, aka common cards. So this is the trend that packs followed for quite some time in Master Duel. Well, not even quite some time, as we are about to see here as we take a look at the next pack. Invincible Raid, not the next pack release, but the next one we're going to take a look at here. This was released August 9th, 2022, so that would have been, what, 4 months after the Ruler's Mask pack. And I'm stopping on Invincible Raid in particular, because this is not only the first time we saw a shift in how selection packs are structured, but it's also the most notable shift of how selection packs are structured. If we scroll down here, we'll see that the number of cards, the rarity distribution has changed. Ignore this little bit that says the pack has 80 featured cards. It's actually 85, as indicated over here. This just looks to be Probably a copy-paste typo. But take a look at the breakdown here. We previously had, again, 80 cards of 10 UR, 15 SR, 20 R, 35 N. Now we have 85 cards that are 13 UR, 17 SR, 20 R, and 35 N. So, starting with Invincible Raid, that's when selection packs became 85 cards, not 80. Of those 5 added cards, 3 are URs and 2 are SRs. So, immediately right off the bat, well, not immediately right off the bat, I guess I should more say a few months into the game with Invincible Raid, we do see a skewing towards putting more expensive cards into the packs, which naturally is going to make it more difficult to pull specifically the UR and SR cards that you need. But this is not the only trend change that we have seen. Okay, so now fast forward over a year, right? We're now at October 30th, 2023, and the Record of Noble Spirits selection pack is the next one to come out. Take a look down here. 85 featured cards, which consist of 13 URs, right? 20 SRs, 22 R, and 30 N. So, at this point, and as with the previous trend, this continues to be the case moving forward. Right at this point, when Record of Noble Spirits is released, that is when there is a further adjustment made to increase the number of SR or super rare cards in the pack by decreasing the number of overall rare cards. Fast forward just a few months to February 2024 with Ride into the Future being released, and we see yet another change to the overall breakdown here. There are now 22, there's still 13 UR cards in a selection pack, but now there are 22 super rare cards, 25 rare cards, and 25 normal cards. So they are pulling cards from the normal pool to give a few back to the rare pool, and then still adding a couple of SR cards per pack. And now here we are at the most recent selection pack release, the time of this video coming out, which is Chaotic Showtime. And as you can see, the previous trend we saw in Ride into the Future continues here. So that is how packs have evolved. Selection packs spreads have evolved over time, right? I'll go ahead and put these up on each side of the screen, but on the left, you can again see the distribution for Ruler's Mask. And on the right, I'll have Chaotic Showtimes, which is really going to fully illustrate just how the pack structure has changed over time. And this is a tactic that we've also seen Konami do in the TCG as well, right? The idea here is that by putting in a higher quantity of higher rarity cards, you are less likely to get the specific high rarity card that you need. So now you are spending even more money on packs to get those specific high rarity cards, or in the case of Master Duel specifically, to get URs in general to dismantle for craft points to craft the URs that you need. Either way, more URs per pack, while also increasing the total number of cards per pack, doesn't actually favor you to pull the URs that you want more often, or even URs in general more often. It just makes the ones that you need to get are a little more difficult to find. And I think it's also very much worth noting this increase in SR cards over time. Now, if you're a regular player like myself, you might be thinking, well, does that even really matter? I'm never hurting for super rare craft points. And to be fair, I'm not either. But if you and I are people who log into Master Duel and, you know, do our dailies pretty much every single day, we are not the typical player. Most people who play Master Duel are very casual, to the point where they probably don't play often enough to have the same kind of bank that we necessarily do. If you think about it, there are lots of casual players out there who are opening packs to pull super rare cards, not even looking for URs, I mean, I'm sure they are as well, but looking for super rares, specifically certain copies, because they are out of craft points. You know, to the casual player, SR can have almost as much scarcity as UR materials. So I do think that the increase in SRs over time is very noteworthy, especially because it's gone up so dramatically when compared to the other rarities, right? it's actually kind of deviously brilliant, because by slowly changing the ratios in this way over time, Konami has shifted packs to not only require competitive players to open more of them to keep up with the game, but casual players as well. So I think that by looking at selection packs by themselves, how they're structured at the start of the game versus how they're structured now, I think that from this angle, we can definitively say that yes, it has over time become costlier to keep up with Master Duel decks. But what about the decks themselves? Are those also getting more expensive, in addition to, as we've illustrated here, the increase of high rarity cards per pack? That's the other angle that I want to tackle this from. So in order to do that, let's start taking a look at some meta decks over the lifespan of Master Duel. Okay, so real fast, before we start looking at the decks themselves, I wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page as far as which generic or quote-unquote staple UR cards are going to be excluded from each count. I will make a couple of notable exceptions to the exceptions on this list, however. So I'll start scrolling through these kind of one at a time, so you can, if you want to pause and see what any particular card is, you can. But I think that a lot of people would generally agree that these cards, which see play, you know, you could reasonably expect to see play in almost any given deck, should be excluded when factoring in how expensive cards are. I know that for a newer player, staples definitely are a factor, but I can tell you from experience that pretty quickly drops off over time, right? That playset of Maxi is going to be useful for like literally every single deck, and to a lesser extent so are a lot of these cards. Now the extra deck stuff, you'll also notice including a couple of banned cards, because we will see these crop up. Extra deck cards can be a little bit different, especially synchro monsters. So in some cases, I will actually count some of the extra deck cards that we'll see here. Oh, like Shengying is actually a great example. Shengying and Sprite Elf. Like, when we cover Sword Soul and count the number of URs, I'll count Shengying for that. But if we see Shengying in other decks, I won't necessarily count it for that. Same with Sprite Elf. You could in particular even just count the second copy of Sprite Elf if you wanted to, because that's specifically what you need for sprites. The first copy is useful in a number of decks, right? So we'll slowly click through these here again as well. Hopefully we're all on the same page about that. I'll kind of try to address any of these discrepancies is the word I was looking for. Any of these discrepancies as they come up. But again, wanted to make sure we're all on the same page, and I think, again, that people can generally agree that this is a good representation of generic UR cards that you wouldn't necessarily count towards a deck's total. Alright, now that we've established that, let's actually look at some of these deck lists here. Okay, first one we're going to take a look at is Brigade Zodiac. So by the way, all these deck lists come from my channel, except with one exception, which I will absolutely be sure to point out. It'll also be pretty obvious, but ignoring the structure of these actual decks themselves, I'm mainly here to count the number of, like, archetype-specific URs, or really even just URs that are very specific to each of these individual decks. I'm starting off with Brigade Zodiac because that is, of the Tier 1 decks in the beginning of Master Duel, the one I'm most familiar with. Eldritch has more URs, but a lot of them are floodgates, and that's kind of debatable how generic those are. So does Drytron, probably has more URs, but again, I have experience with Brigade Zodiac, and I wanted to start with this one. So, if we count the URs here, you know, we're going to exclude these Maxis, exclude the Ash Blossoms. I'll exclude Harpy's Feather Duster and the 2 Lightning Storm. Look, it was a different time, okay? Eldritch had 3 of every floodgate and could coin flip glitch to always go first. 2 Lightning Storm was not that weird, I promise. But that aside, Call By I'm not counting, and Imperm I'm not counting, and Imperial Order I'm also not counting. So, I, again, think it's pretty reasonable to say those are all generic cards. That leaves no archetype-specific URs in the main deck. For the extra deck, I'll count Trident. Of course, not Zeus, though, or Almirage. Those are pretty generic. So are Apo and Axis Code. But I will count the 2 Brigade Shurg, the Ominous Omen. That's 3. That is 3 URs within the Tri-Brigade and Zodiac archetypes combined in order to build this tier 1 deck at the start of Master Duel, which is frankly unheard of nowadays. Let's see the next list here. And that next list is going to be Sword Soul Teni, or I guess Teni Sword Soul as I put it here. So again, we'll count the URs, not counting C's, Ash Blossoms, or Ghost Spells. So we have 1, 2, 3 with Moye. Not going to count Nibiru. And not going to count Call by Crosshead or Imperm. So 3 with the Moyes. Extra deck. Not going to count Omega. I will count Berserker, so that's 1. Dragite. It's debatable whether that's generic or not. I think it's useful in enough decks that I won't count it. So there's 1, 2, 3. I'll count Xiao Feng, even though we will see it in another deck list here. One other one. I'll still count it here. So that's what? 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, I'll count Shenging here. So 5 in the extra, 3 in the main, for a total of 8. Still not bad. Honestly, still fairly unheard of for, I believe, modern meta deck UR spreads. Now, I want to specify meta deck here and really drive that point home. I'll actually drive it home a little bit more after we look at these 10 decks, but do note that we are mainly looking at meta-relevant decks to see how expensive those get. Although, I don't think looking at casual decks is invalid. I'm just going to, again, do that a little bit later. But anyway, moving on to the next meta deck here. And that's going to be Adventure Teni, everybody's favorite Master Duel deck. I mean, hey, I actually liked it, so... Oh, Protoss. I forgot Protoss in that last list. So it's actually more around 9 for Sword Soul. 8 to 9. That's pretty reasonable. So no Maxi, no Ash Blossom. I will count adventure stuff. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Not counting Nib or Foolish. Not counting those. So what, 4 we said? Oh, no, the Rite of Armistiers. Forgot those. So that's 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the main. 1. Let's see. See, this is interesting, right? To know whether to count Qi Xiao and Xiao Fang here. I will, but I want to say, too, that this metric is so much trickier to actually define than it was for packs, right? Because how expensive a meta deck is so dependent from person to person. I'm sure a lot of people who built Adventure Teni already had Sword Soul built and would have needed to craft these 2 cards. So do we count them for this? I will, but I would very much also agree with an argument for not counting them. I won't count Shenging because it's a lot more generic than Qi Xiao and Xiao Feng. I'm also not going to count Tomahawk because that's a legacy pack UR and that's easy enough to come across. So for the extra, it's what? 1, 2, 3, 4 Hulk, 5 Auroradon. 5 plus, what did we say? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now we're looking at a total of 11. Among these first 3 decks, we are starting to see a bit of an increase. 3 to 8 / 9 to 11, right? But let's keep looking and see if that trend actually continues. Okay, the next deck I have picked here is Runic Sprite. I wanted to pick this deck in particular because we could not only count the 2 engines together, but also separately, which I think is very handy. So, also this build only has 2 Fountain, but for the purposes of counting the number of URs you would need for a Runic deck, I'll just include the 3rd Fountain. In that regard, we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, again we're counting a 3rd Fountain, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 for the main deck, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'll only count 1 elf here, like I said before, 6, and then 7 with the Avermax. So 11 plus 7, 18 in total. That's quite a bit. But remember that these are 2 robust archetypes that were in separate selection packs. So I think it would be more fair to evaluate them separately. Let's do that. For a Sprite, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm counting Avermax too, because I don't think it's that generic. So 9 for Sprite. And then for Runic, it's 1, 2, and I'll count again the third fountain, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So when you look at it from that angle, and especially when you compare it directly to something like Sword Soul, that is still pretty consistent. About 8 URs dedicated to a specific deck to build it does seem to be the trend moving forward. Now, again, Runic Sprite is the combination of those two, which is why I think this is an outlier as far as, like, this standalone deck has a ton of URs. But I think it's more fair to evaluate them separately like we did. Let's take a look at the next deck here. Shizu Tier Limits. You either loved it or hated it. I was in the loved it camp. But I'll count Fairy Tail Snow here. I don't think this card is like the most generic. It is a pretty specific subset of decks that want to play it. But we'll also keep in mind the figure without it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 URs for a Shizu Tier Limit. Debatably 13 if you don't want to count Snow. Now, you might argue that, well, the Shizu and Tier Limit archetypes are separate, much like Runic and Sprite, so wouldn't you want to evaluate them separately? I'm actually going to say no, because here's the thing. Shizu and Tier Limits, like, when these cards are both legal, you always play the Shizus and Tier Limits. And even though these did come out in 2 different selection packs, they were back-to-back selection packs, so they were both in the shop at the same time, right? So I don't count the Shizu necessarily as a separate archetype here because of how integral it was to the Tier Limits deck. So, what did I say? 14 if we include Snow, 13 if not. And then the extra has 1, 2, I'll count Dweller and Trident. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll definitely count Redoer because I don't think that card is very generic. So what did I say? 5? So yeah, that's looking at a total of 19? Even if you don't include Snow, Dweller, Trident, or Redoer, that's still 15 URs. Which is a lot. That's a lot. That is definitely a lot more than we've seen, even for like Adventure Teni, which was a bit of a mashup pile deck, and as a result would be more likely to include more URs. So I think that in terms of the most popular and prominent meta decks, we are starting to see a bit of an upward trend in the number of required URs. Let's keep investigating, though. All right, next up is Cash Tira. I'm not going to count Kura Ikara. I think it's generic enough, and it's, I don't know, I really don't think you even play it that often in Cash Tira. So excluding that, as well as, of course, Maxi, Ash Blossom, yada yada, all the rest, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 main deck URs. You might argue that Fenrir and Unicorn are generic. I wouldn't even necessarily disagree with that, but the fact remains that if you want to play a Kashira deck, you have to craft these cards. And for that reason, I am including them in the total. So, what I say, 12? Yeah, 12 main deck URs. Extra deck is 13, 14 for the Arise Hearts. So, and that's all Kashtira cards too. That's not even including like some of these other breakdowns, like with the tier limit, like we just saw. We're not even factoring in generic but still deck specific stuff, kind of like Snow and Redoer. This is again 1, 2, 3 Rise Heart, 4, 5 Fenrir, 6, 7, 8 with the Unicorns. 11 and then 12 with Great Saw, 13, 14. Those are 14 URs with Kashira in the name. Again, it was kind of spaced out over 2 selection packs, but again, the fact remains if you wanted to play a Kashira deck, that was the required number of URs for that archetype. And again, the upward trend that we saw in Tier Limit has actually continued here. But let's keep looking. Pure Snake Eye. It's going to be the next one we're going to take a look at here. We've got 1, 2 Poplars, plus 3, 4, 5 Diabels, 6, 7 for Flamberge, 8, 9, 10 for Bonfire, 11 for OSS, 12, 13, 14 for the Wanteds. And then this extra deck is actually kind of entirely generic. But you could debatably count Promethean Princess and Zealantis. I mean, Zealantis is very generic. I guess so is Prom Princess, but that's why I say it's pretty debatable, right? So maybe tentatively 2 from the extra deck, but still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 in the main. So yeah, you can definitely tell that even a deck that doesn't have any archetypal URs, they still give it enough URs overall to have the same total count, even, you know, factoring in archetypes that do have extra deck cards. So it doesn't seem that the quantity or type of card really affects the rarity distribution. Konami is wanting to make sure they get whatever number of URs they want to into each of these meta decks, seemingly. All right, let's continue to look. All right, for Yubel, skipping past Maxi and Ash Blossom, I'll count Sharvara, even though it's of course an Unchained card. You do still need it for a Yubel deck. So let's go 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's it for the main deck. 4 main deck URs. For the extra deck, we have 1, 2, 3 for the Phantoms, 5 for Yama, and 6 for Abon / second Yama. You could argue for either in that slot, but both are URs, right? So 4 in the, what did I say, 4 in the main, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the extra for a total of 9. And it would actually only be 8 nowadays because the Phantom is now semi-limited. So Yubel, we'll say 9 though, because that was the factor on release. We still counted the third bonfire, etc., etc. So 9 URs for Yubel on release is actually a fair bit cheaper than we had seen in the trend up to that point. But it still falls in line with the same kind of figure we would see around Sword Soul, Adventure Teni, Runic, and then Sprite era, right? So Yubel does seem to be a notable outlier as far as the upward trend. We actually do see a bit of a downward turn here, but will that continue? Okay, so this list is pretty obviously not my own. I guess I don't know how obvious that is, but I don't own Voiceless voice cards. So this is going to be from Road of the King. I'm going to link in the description below the article I pulled this list from. This is the first placed Season 35 Master Duel rating duel deck list. So again, very much not my own. Let's count for Voiceless voice. So 1, 2, 3. I'll count Diviners and Sorvis here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16! Main deck UR is 16! 1, 6. Extra deck has Entis, which is decently debatable how generic that is. Would bring the total up to 17. But I mean, even if you don't count Entis, and even if you don't count Sorvis and the 3 Diviners, because while not like the most generic cards, it's not unreasonable to expect you to already own these and this. But those aside, that is still 12 URs, right? Isn't it 1, 2, 3? Yep, and then 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 URs for the Voiceless voice deck. So we are now seeing that trend back upward again, more towards the 12 range of number of required URs as opposed to 8. And yeah, I would say 12 to 16. I think it's pretty debatable, but we'll even be generous and keep it towards the lower end of the spectrum, right? Okay, the final list that I've got is my Toy White Forest deck. Now, I don't think that this is like on par with the other lists that we've seen as far as like how powerful they are in their respective metas. I'm not saying this White Forest deck is as good as like, you know, Adventure Teni and a Shizu tier limits were. But it was actually a comment, I believe, on this video, this deck profile, that kind of got me thinking about making this video in the first place. And also, this is the most recent, at least somewhat meta-relevant deck released in Master Duel. I think making it a pretty good last meta deck for us to look at here. So if we count these URs, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 for the main deck. Extra is going to have Triage Master and Crystal Wing. These are pretty debatable, but at least 1 for the Diabel, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 total. Again, we're still in about that 12 range. And that's been very consistent. So at the beginning, in the very, very early days, it kind of seemed like it was more Wild West as far as what number of URs each deck got. And I remember thinking that when I first started playing Master Duel, that it did kind of feel like it was a pretty even distribution regardless of how competitive or casual the deck was. Or is, rather. Anyway. And then we saw it go a little bit more up towards 8, pretty early on in the game's lifespan, and even later on with Yubel a little bit too, and then up again more towards about 12 URs per deck is kind of the new average, right? So if you look at meta-relevant decks, the most meta-relevant decks over time, yes, you can see an upward trend in terms of the UR cost per deck, but does that mean that decks overall are more expensive? I think that's a little more dubious. So to sort of illustrate what I mean by that, I want to look at another recent archetype that has meta relevance, although maybe not quite as much as some of the decks we've seen. Let's pull up Goblin Biker here. Now, I own at least one of every Goblin Biker card, so we're seeing all of the Goblin Biker cards currently in Master Duel here, and of course there are more to come. However, if we look, the only UR among them is their boss monster, the Goblin Biker Big Gabonga. Now, this is not the only, I guess, more casual, quote-unquote, archetype we've seen this trend with. In fact, this tends to be fairly common, and if you think about it, it actually makes a lot of sense. If meta decks over time are getting more expensive, then it would mean that casual decks over time are getting less expensive. Another fantastic example of this is the Gate Guardian deck. It would help if I could spell guard correctly. We'll just say Gate G, how about that? That might have been a little bit too, yeah, all right. But the Gate Guardian archetype is one where, again, we're only really seeing one UR in the whole archetype, and that's the Gate Guardians combined, their boss monster. So, I think that the better way to phrase this question might be, is Konami being more selective with how many URs competitive decks get as opposed to casuals? The answer to that question is undoubtedly yes. But if you're asking the question, is Master Duel more expensive to play now? That actually is a lot more difficult to answer because it is so dependent on the player-to-player experience, right? Not even just casual players. Think about the people who pets deck, right? The people who stick to one competitive deck and it's all they play. Like, if you're a Sword Soul main and all you play is Sword Soul, and especially if you got into Master Duel with the free Sword Soul structure deck, then this game is literally just free for you. It is quite literally just free. And, you know, you don't have to worry about spending money. And I think Sword Soul, it's not unreasonable to say that even if it's not the most powerful deck right now, it can still pretty decently keep up with the meta. You know, honestly, about as well, if not better, than something like Goblin Biker, right? Which again only has one UR in the whole archetype. And even though I call Goblin Biker more casual, I do still think it has a lot of competitive potential. So, if you're like me, and I think a lot of the people watching this video will be, if you're like me in that you keep up with the Yu-Gi-Oh! Meta very consistently and you're trying to build as many of the meta-relevant decks as possible, then yes, the costliness factor is going up over time. But if you're a casual player, or if you just choose to play less powered decks in a competitive environment still, or if you just main one deck, then the answer is no. The game is actually not, you know, affecting you in a financial way in that regard. Which, again, makes this whole section a lot more nuanced and messy than the other one. So where do we end up at the end of all that, right? Is this game actually getting more expensive over time? Well, like I said before when we looked at the pack, the selection packs, I think that we are seeing a very objective trend that Konami is making it so that in order to pull the URs you specifically want, you're going to have to spend more over a period of time. Again, I think that one we can pretty firmly lock in as a definitive yes. Now, are decks getting more expensive? Are specifically meta decks getting more expensive over time? I think, again, the answer is, generally speaking, yes. Although you do have to remember, again, that I cherry-picked a selection of decks across the meta. As mentioned at the top of the video, Branded, Monadium, I didn't include stuff like those because of how much trickier they would be to account for. I mean, there's so many different factors also in trying to answer a question like this, you know? For the Branded player, how expensive their deck is entirely depends on when they started playing Master Duel. Yeah, if you wanted to build Branded coming into Master Duel brand new now, you would have to spend a lot, but somebody who's been playing since the start really didn't have to spend that much per selection pack in order to update their Branded deck, which also had multiple iterations with various amounts of URs over time. That is a very long way of saying that the latter question, are meta decks more expensive over time, I don't think is one you can put a definitive answer on. I mean, really, the question, is the game getting more expensive, is too broad a stroke, right? Nuance is always required when evaluating stuff like this. I was going to say when evaluating topics, you know, that are this subjective, but I think every topic to an extent requires this degree of nuance. It's so easy to look for the yes or no, black or white answer, right? But that is very rarely the case that you're going to get that. Not just when looking at statistics or anything like this, but like, I mean, in life, right? But I digress. So if you are looking for an objective, firm answer, I guess I'll say yes. I do think that after looking at this research and data, Master Duel decks are getting more expensive over time. All right, I think that's going to go ahead and do it for this one. Before we move to our outro, I just want to say a couple of things real quick. One, I've already announced this in a couple of videos and on social media as well, but just so you all know, I guess who are watching to the end of the video here too, I am going to be taking a break from uploading videos to YouTube for the last week of December. So this is going to be the last one you'll see for 2024, but we will be back on January 1st, 2025. If you are looking for some more content from me in the meantime, you'll definitely want to check out the description below or head to a couple of different sites. YouTube.com/@HexLexPlays. That's my second channel, HexLexPlays. I've got Master Duel VODs over there, as well as a bunch of Pokemon Pocket and Alestrals content if that happens to interest you. Over on patreon.com/hexlex. There I have uploaded videos every day for like, well, I think almost 2 years now. I was gonna say well over a year. I think it's almost 2 now, if not a little bit more. And as of the past like few months, everything there has been fully exclusive content. Nothing that you would see on YouTube is what you'll see over on Patreon. So definitely feel free to check that out. Those links are going to be in the description below as well. I hope you all have a very happy holiday. And yeah, like I said, I'll see you in the new year. For now, let's go ahead and move on to our outro. Hey everybody, HexLex here. Just want to give you a huge thanks for watching all the way to the very end of the video. Believe it or not, that is actually one of the best ways that you can support the channel, is by watching the videos in their entirety. But there are many ways in which you can support the channel if you are so interested. The names that you're seeing on screen here, I gotta give an extra special thanks to, because these are people who have chosen to either become a member on YouTube, which if you're interested you can do as well via the join button next to the subscribe button down down there, or have signed up over on Patreon and become members there. Link to that is going to be in the description below. Without the support that is being offered by, again, all the people that you're seeing on screen right here, I would not be able to take the time to dedicate to uploading daily YouTube videos. So thank you so very much. But there are also other ways you can support as well. Again, link to the description below. If you like my deck tracker that you'll see in a lot of my videos, the Untapped Companion, you can download that for free, and if you use my affiliate link down there, then that also goes a long way towards supporting the channel. That's, again, free. So is subscribing here on YouTube. That's also free and a huge way to support. You can also check out Twitch, once again linked in the description below. Following and subscribing over there will not only support as well, but also give you notifications of when I go live if you want to catch some of the live streams. But really, no matter how you choose to support, it all adds up and it all definitely means the world. So thank you, each and every one of you. For now, this is Hexlex. I'm going to be signing out, but more than that, I'm hoping that you have a fantastic day.